AFUX does certificate lifecycle management. We kind of take your PKI, your infrastructure, and automate it, both from a DevOps kind of reduce the outages, and then also from a security perspective, we protect your private keys and just kind of protect your crown jewels, the keys to the castle, to make sure that only those who need access to them when they need the access have access. And we can, through automation, we can integrate with like an ITSM. So if there's a developer that's spinning up a new web application, we can actually go and install the certificate directly without them even interacting with any PKI infrastructure. We'll issue the certificate, install it, and then as needed, we can revoke the certificate, we can renew it, reduce outages, no more spreadsheets to manage everything, nothing kind of getting forgotten.
What folder is that in?
Yep, exactly. No shared calendar that I forgot to subscribe to. I didn't get the alert. Oh my God.
Expired? Oh, wow.
Yep, exactly.
So is this cloud-based, or are you doing like a HSM for the vaulting and all the managing on-prem?
We integrate with, we're CA agnostic. We'll integrate with all the CAs. We'll integrate with an HSM if you're using one. And then we'll go and install it. We even have part of our platform around application delivery. We'll even manage your application delivery controller from firmware or any changes that if you want to change the ciphers. If you're managing multiple application delivery controllers, getting that uniformity, that kind of golden image on all of them. It's a pain for a lot of people. So that's also something that we kind of bring to the table.
Excuse me. So I just finished a talk on API security, and the message was, manual nothing, because it's all happening too fast. You'll never keep up.
It's not even that. You also
PKI is kind of the same challenge, right?
Yeah. So it's not even just too fast. So there's two parts to why you would want to automate it. The first one is, you want to make sure that you have the consistency and that you don't have somebody fat fingering, forgetting a step. If you've sat there and you've done the same mundane task over and over again, at some point you're like, I know the steps. I don't need the checklist. Yeah. I'll sit there.
Shortcut.
Oh, wait, on that one, I forgot this step. And on that one, I forgot this step. And all of a sudden, that consistency is no longer there. But then on the flip side, and it's kind of my personal soapbox, but, do you really want your employees sitting there and doing a mundane task? You didn't hire smart individuals to sit there and just click on the same button in the Ford plant over and over again, screwing the wrench. You tap into their knowledge, tap into their brain. Let's free our people from the mundane, use automation where we can, and tap into people's potential.
I'm curious, are you primarily working with CAs, external CAs, or do you also have people who have, God forbid, they've gone off and created their own CA hierarchy and trying to manage it themselves? Bigger organizations can do that, but most people can't afford or find the people to do that.
So, all of the above. We're finding that people not only have one external CA and often, like you said, a private CA internally. We're also finding through whether it be like a merger and acquisition situation or they migrated from one onto another. A lot of organizations have more than one public CA that they're working with. And
I would think most do, yeah.
It's crazy because, it's so easy for things to just fall between the cracks and for people to miss things. And again, back to those spreadsheets of like that one system that's a middleware somewhere that integrates with everything all together. Nobody remembers. And by the way, that's using a cert, and whoever created it way back when isn't here anymore. And that shared calendar was their calendar. And, now we have an outage. And it's funny. I mean, being here at RSA, we've had several people come by our booth of, we just had a certificate outage. We need a solution for this. So many people are having outages because of it. I'm a huge believer in the security side of things of, hey, let's make sure our private keys, and we don't want, the exposure there. I mean, look at SolarWinds. Their private keys, that were used for signing software were exposed, and that's really kind of what happened.
Not recommended.
Right, exactly. But even before that perspective, you have the perspective of an outage, and people don't even think that it could be something as simple as a certificate.
It's amazing because, software is happening all over the organization too. So it's yeah, it's the IT and the network organization security, but it's happening in the business unit. Somebody goes and fires up credit card with some hosting service or cloud service, and gets a Google certificate or whatever from wherever, and
nobody knows about it.
Nobody knows about it. It's not managed and it expires someday, or it wasn't set up with the proper security standards. So it's a proliferation problem too. For
sure, and it's something that we're seeing over and over and over again. I mean, I can't tell you how many organizations. Being a former CISO, I hate the idea of running a scan in a network that in an environment, but through doing something like that, you'd be surprised how many of those, hey, that one guy bought I saw a company with a GoDaddy certificate that had never been a GoDaddy customer that some guy bought just
some
like you
contractor,
said, with their own,
right, whatever,
with their own credit card because they just wanted to finish the project and get it done so they could go on vacation. And that was sitting there. And when that certificate expired, it was an outage.
Yep. That's the world we live in today. So tell me a little bit about, there's so much around zero trust, there's so much around XDR. Security world is buzzword bingo, right? and no thanks to the analyst, and I'm an analyst. We create that problem for ourselves. Zero trust has been a conversation for a long time, mostly about what it is. I think people are getting more, okay, how do I start? Where do I start? What do I do? What's your take on zero trust, and how do we need to think about it?
It's really interesting because we're seeing that, you walk down on the floor, you'll see zero trust on every single booth. I heard somebody say yesterday, it's zero trust 30. It's just crazy to me. Which
it's going to be a car brand pretty soon,
basically at this point, which truth be told, it sucks because it's a really important concept and it's something that's very critical as a mindset for security that's being turned into a buzzword that just everybody seems to be throwing out there. But within zero trust, everybody's talking about kind of the human identity. And again, back to the concept of, you don't let something onto your network without knowing who they are and making sure that you authenticate it and all that. What I'm missing, and it's something that we happen to be talking about, is what about the machines? What about the devices we're allowing on our networks? Why are you allowing somebody to authenticate? For them to authenticate, that machine already needs an IP address, needs to be able to communicate, needs to be on the network. Why are you letting it on the network? Why aren't you authenticating, making sure that device, is authenticated as part of your network, and that zero trust model is even a step before authenticating the human behind the device, you're authenticating the actual device. And that's, machine identity management, which is one of the things that we do and we assist with. We do that through certificates and pushing certificates to devices for authentication on your environment before you let it in. Real quick on that, I can tell you that, I did a lot of OT security with, gas and oil and water and power in airports. And I walked the terminal with the CIO and a CISO from an airport. The three of us walked together. And they just looked at me and they said, look around, what do you see? I said, I don't know, I see people. What do I see? He's like, well, they all have devices. I'm like, yeah. He's like, all those devices have white cables. And it's true. Everybody has a white charging cable. Mm-hmm. And he said to me, they'll plug that USB into anything. And even if it's a network cable that's white, security in the airport isn't going to notice a white cable. They're going to think that somebody's charging. So how do you make sure that only the devices that should be on the network and should be given the access are doing that? And that's kind of the importance of machine identity management.
I remember just a total side story. I think it was San Jose Airport. I remember somebody had put a sticker of an outlet that had 2 USB ports. It was just a sticker. It wasn't a real thing.
How many people tried to plug in?
Sit there and watch.
Was there a hidden camera?
No, I don't know. There might have been. I don't know at that part. I was just sitting across from him and okay, let's see how many people do this. I'll bet it's a few. No, it's a lot.
Yeah, and that's a sticker. Now imagine if it's, an actual device that's pretending to be something else.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned, you're talking about the DevOps and software process, and we were speaking of automation. With cloud native and microservices, we're doing API, RESTful, whatever, protocol across, a fabric of, thousands, if not more, tens, hundreds of thousands of microservices internally, externally. That's a huge fabric to secure. It's got to be automated, rotated, managed, governed. I wouldn't want to set up my own PKI hierarchy if I didn't have to, but it's got to be done properly, or it's a mess. I mean, you'll never cleaning that up is bad news.
We're part of quite a few projects of cleaning that up. It's a pain.
But when you step into one of those situations, where do you start? Do you kind of go back to the beginning? Where's
So I think the original quote of you can't start curing something unless you admit you have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, how do you admit you have a problem? Well, you find out what you have. And we'll do, like I said before, we'll do a discovery. And we can do that through running a scan on your network. Or, we can also connect into your CAs and pull the inventory from your CAs and say, okay, here's what we know what we have. If it's a one-off like that, we accept the risk of whatever it is. And at that time, we'll review it. But 99% of what we have is here. Let's start to clean this up. Let's start to either... And I've been part of a few healthcare projects where we'll actually decide, okay, we're going to move to a new PKI infrastructure. We're going to move to a new CA. We're going to have to revoke all of this, reissue, reinstall.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pain. I'm not going to lie.
It's a process for sure. Yeah.
But when you come out of that and you know that it's fully automated and you don't have to worry about it again, and you know that if it needs to be renewed, it's going to be renewed on its own. If you need more, it's either connected into your ITSM or you have a process where you can log into our system and go through our request process, and you can even pick which CA if you have multiple CAs that you're using. We have the option to add approvers within our own system, so we can really work with what kind of the enterprise's bureaucracy, red tape process dictates,
mm-hmm.
and align to what the company wants, and that's what we've been helping. We do have, just talking about fun stuff for a second.
Yeah.
We do have a few other projects that are definitely fun. We're helping an IoT healthcare wearable actually secure people's health information. So we're installing certificates at manufacturing on a wearable that people put on their body to secure the communication to whether it's another wearable that's reading the information, like a watch, for example, or a phone or equipment at a doctor's office or anything like that. We're encrypting all of that information, not only so that, your, mine, Joe Schmo's security is intact, but world leaders who, if you're the CIA and you want to know what, somebody in Asia's blood pressure is because they're a world leader, we're helping kind of make sure and keep all of our health information secure. So I think that's a really cool project that we've been a part of. And PKI, as much as PKI is not sexy and fun, it's definitely interesting and it's definitely a wild ride.
It's sort of like the roads or some element used in roads. We have to have it. I mean, it's fundamental to what we do for sure. Any impressions from RSAC this year? We're obviously all back in person and good to be connecting and not sitting behind the screen, but any other
other than seeing Zero Trust everywhere.
Yeah, that's true. It is everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
It's great to see people in person. It's great to shake hands again. It's great to look people in the eye. People that I've had the opportunity to meet people I've worked with for over 2 years that all of a sudden I thought you were going to be taller, or just giving somebody a hug because you've worked with them for so long, you become friends virtually. We've never really hung out and had the opportunity to go out and have a drink with a friend. It's definitely been an interesting and fun experience.
That human connection.
Yes.
Nothing like in-person human connection.
Absolutely.
Alon, great to have you come by. Thanks for chatting.
Thank you for having me.
PKI, lifecycle management and tying it into DevOps and some of the fun projects.
For sure.
You're doing. Hope you'll come back. And where can folks find out more? Where can they find out?
You can come to our website at www.appvuex.com.
Great. Any particular resource there, or free trial, free account, or
all of it is all there. People can check in. We actually launched our new brand, so it's a brand new website, and hope people like it.
Okay, good. Yeah, quick. If you've been there before, go again because it's new. So, all right, take care.
Thank you.
This is TechstrongTV.
Hey, welcome back to RSAC 2022. Mitch Ashley, we're just rotating all of our all of our hosts. Alan is offsite doing some fun stuff. So I have the great pleasure of being joined by Alon Nahwani. Thank you very much. I appreciate the help. And you are a field CISO with AppViewX. There we go. I'm stumbling. It's been a long week, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's well, I think we're all pretty much exhausted at this point.
Yeah, we're kind of reaching that giddy stage. I think I am. Well, tell us about yourself. Tell us about the company.
So I'm the field CISO for AppViewX. I've been here for about 2.5 years. AppViewX does certificate lifecycle management.
This is TechstrongTV.
All right, welcome back. This is our last interview. Can I say I'm happy and I'm sad? No, I'm sad that we're going to be wrapping things up at RSAC 2022. Have the great pleasure of Alex Marshall. Alex is co-founder. Co-founder.
There's three of us.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. We won't tell the other guy. Anyway. Chief Product Officer with TwinGate. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's great to be here.
Good to have you here. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about TwinGate, and we'll kind of get into some interesting stuff.
Yeah. So as I said, there's three of us that found the company. We're a couple of us are actually ex-Dropbox employees, and the reason I mention that is that a lot of I think we're really passionate about is this well-designed products. And I think what's different about TwinGate is that we sort of set a bar for ourselves to say that if you're going to introduce a security product, it should also be easier to use, which is usually something that security acts against, right? So we've done a lot of work around that. But the genesis for the company is that we're really interested in remote work. It's been this trend for the last 10 or 15 years. We're going more and more towards that. And when we were researching the company, we realized that, I was pretty surprised to find out almost everybody still uses a VPN, even though it's a really old technology.
Interesting.
And isn't really suited for a device to connect into a network, right? It was actually designed to connect two networks together. Right? And so that led us down this whole path of sort of really thinking about, zero trust network access and thinking about how we can make it easier using that sort of good design Dropbox background. And that's sort of where we are. And so our mission is, make it easy for people to adopt zero trust principles inside their businesses.
Very cool. Good stuff. So one of the things that I was mentioned to you before we got started is I had a talk on API security, and one of the themes was this is all exploding, happening so fast. There's so much of it going on. Yeah. APIs being created. You have to automate security. It isn't. I mean, we've talked about automating security. Sometimes we're a little scared to do that. Turn on the blocking. Yeah. Kinds of things, but in the software world, it is moving at an accelerating pace. Yeah. And to secure it, if you aren't automating, it's not just shift left, it's automating left or automating left, center, and middle, right. All of it, up, down, sideways. Yeah. Give me your take on automation. I know that's that's a kind of center of the target for you too.
Yeah, we're really passionate about it, and our sort of core target user is actually DevOps teams, and the reason that's true is that generally DevOps teams have had to deal with managing all the infrastructure that runs the product behind the scenes, but then separately trying to think about how people get access to the infrastructure in a secure way, and usually these are two really independent decisions. And one of the things that we saw, sort of older methods like VPN, is that you sort of have to make compromises around the way your network, routing is set up and the way VPCs are interconnected, that type of thing, to account for the fact that the VPN is a pretty dumb tool. So from the standpoint of how TwinGate ties into that, we're able to give very specific access into very specific networks with almost very little configuration to make it really easy. And a couple of things show up from a DevOps standpoint. First of all, is on the automation side. By far, one of the most common methods for deploying TwinGate is using a tool like Terraform or Pulumi, both of which we support. And we're just noticing that people are setting up their infrastructure with infrastructure as code, sort of like this sort of parallel thing of like it's almost like security as code, right? So you just add it into the same config, and you're proactively anticipating the fact that people are going to need to access these systems, and you're proactively setting up restrictions and limits around that. And the other thing I'll just mention that I think also helps around automation is there's automating the configuration of the architecture and making sure that as you change your architecture of security, it keeps up with it. But the other side is actually really important is dealing with like on-call situations. So we have there's this concepts, bit fuzzy sometimes, this concept of ephemeral access, which is like, can you make sure that the on-call team has immediate access into the infrastructure if there's an issue, and have it all be audited and have that rotation map to what your on-call schedule is. So I think there's like multiple layers on automation sort of tying to all this.
Ephemeral access, just don't have ephemeral deliverables. That might be
exactly. Exactly.
It's late. It's the end of the week. It's interesting because you talk about infrastructure as code. It's a declarative world all the way to go into a GitOps kind of scenario. But doesn't security also have to be declarative? If you're going to be declaring your stack, through configuration and code, it seems like security as code is sort of obvious. Maybe not, but I mean, that has to be. You're not going to manually go in and set all that up or script it to be manually, but not declarative. Yeah,
no, that's a great point actually. I really think it does need to be, and I think one of the challenges we run into when we talk to our customers is they're dealing with lots of different platforms, lots of different users, all simple different locations. Right? Yeah, exactly. And that's where it's like, in principle, it should be pretty straightforward, but people are moving around a lot. And if you're, the one person that needs to access the system and happens to be on vacation in Mexico, it's like, okay, well, like, yes, they should be able to access it, but maybe it's because they're on a hotel Wi-Fi, they need better security around their internet connection. So one of the things, we've really been, I think it's pretty different about our product is that we sort of look at ourselves as sort of this layer that stitches everything together. And so on the, if you think about what the zero trust question is, it's really, should this particular user on this particular device in this context access this destination resource? And the part that's actually really hard, single sign-on's made the identity part easier, is actually devices. And so we have a whole sort of like, section of our product that helps tie together integrations with all the various like methods that people use to secure corporate devices. And so you can say that, if you can determine automatically that a device someone's using is their own personal device, a BYOD device, but it meets certain minimum requirements, then you can make some decisions about what infrastructure you want them to access. And so it is sort of like declarative, a little bit like it is on the infrastructure side, but there's a different flavor to it because of just how often things change, because you can't pin down users, right? They're going to do whatever they want to do. Right? So,
I tell folks, even in Star Trek Next Generation, they have devices, right? We're going to have these things forever. It is just in our DNA. We have our stuff. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Let's kind of wrap it up this way. Something I ask most folks is, coming to our RSAC again in person, the personal connection, seeing each other, collaborating that way is super valuable, and you appreciate it so much more. Are there any other kind of takeaways, impressions from RSAC this year that you're going, okay, glad we got there? I thought this might be true, and it is, or more so. Or,
I don't know. I mean, I think first of all, this is great. It's great to be back in person again. RSA was the last thing I did before the lockdown really started the pandemic. So it's good to be back. It's like nice bookend everything. But it's really just that I think the thing that I'm reminded of, like being here in person, is just seeing how many companies there are in the security space and how many different solutions are. Yeah. And I think it's sort of, on the one hand, people have like an amazing array of choices for like all kinds of companies doing really specialized and amazing things. But on the other hand, it's like actually really hard from the buyer standpoint to like figure out like what should they do, right? And how do they tie together these different tools? And I think that is one thing that I've seen change over the last like 10, 15 years or so, is like you did have like a lot of, I feel like you had more concentration of larger vendors that did lots of different things. And now you have a lot more like tool specialization. It just really drives that home, like walking around and seeing that in person.
A lot of that too is the VC funding and startup companies and get a proliferation. Sometimes a lot of overlap too. Where there isn't differentiation. Then it's really hard. Like, okay, how is this XDR different from that XDR?
Right, exactly.
Whatever it might be.
But it's great. I mean, honestly, it's really great to see like so much innovation in the security space, and just it's just so important, right? This isn't a problem that's going away anytime soon. So.
No, I agree with that. Well, Alex, you have the distinct pleasure or notoriety of being the last guest on the live stream from RSAC.
Hopefully someone's still watching.
So yeah, and I'm pretty sure they hung with us. I have no reason to think they would have. So thanks for joining us, and thanks to you for making this a great conference and being part of our live stream.
Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, thanks a lot.
I want to thank everyone on behalf of Alan Schimmel and Charlene O'Hanlon, myself. Mark Miller did some hosting here as well. We have Brian, Paul, Rob, Sharon, Jody, a number of folks that are all behind the scenes, turning the knobs, making sure the lights are pointed at the right place, and queuing things up. So, they can't fix the editing if I say something dumb, but, they make it happen. So, and thanks to the crew back at BOCO and around the world that are part of the TechStrong group. So, thanks to Alex and all our great guests. Appreciate you being with us for this live stream, and we hope you'll join us at our next event. Of course, always tune in to TechstrongTV. Monday, Tuesday, and Thursdays are fresh content, and we have all of our wonderful sites. We have virtual events. Go to TechstrongEvents.com. Check out our great research, self-serving plug, great research at TechStrong Research, lots of free reports. We're going to have some things coming out on API security that I talked about today. So thanks for being with us, and we will see you in the digital universe. Take care, man.
This is Techstrong TV.
Well, hey, welcome back. We had RSAC 2022, and it's Thursday. Whew, it's been a long week, but a lot of great stuff that have happened here. And one of the great things that have happened is Amit Shah, who stopped by. He is Director of Product Marketing at Dynatrace. Welcome.
Oh, thank you very much, Mike.
Yeah, glad to have you spend some time with us. Well, we're going to dig in some data. Of course, as an analyst, I like to see the data.
Yeah.
But before we do that, tell us a little bit about yourself, and for folks that may not know Dynatrace, what Dynatrace does.
Yeah, sure thing. I'm a relative newcomer to Dynatrace. I've been here for about 2 months or so, but I have a background primarily in application development and application security. So it's really exciting to be here at RSA, the first in-person conference I've had at least for the past 2 years or so, and like everyone else. Yeah, really exciting to meet everybody, see how the industry has progressed. So in terms of what Dynatrace is and Dynatrace does, I guess we're also, a new force to be reckoned with in the security industry. And so we we come from the observability space. And so our mission is to make every digital transaction flawless and secure. And in order to be able to do that, we have a market-leading platform that can basically let you know, give you deep observability into what's happening inside your applications at any given time. And we've applied that to the application security space, and we do mainly at this point 3 things, but there will be more coming in the future. We can look into the applications and do runtime vulnerability analysis. Tell you whether or not whether any kind of vulnerabilities in open source or open source code are actually being executed, and whether they're actually what the impact would be if they were exploited. And so you should probably, whether you need to fix them now or not. We do DevSecOps automation, and we recently launched the ability to do attack detection and blocking. So anytime someone launches a SQL injection attack or a command injection attack or anything like that, we're able to catch it because we're looking into how the code is being executed, and potentially block it if you so choose.
Okay, good. Love to get into that sometime too.
Yeah.
I know you had a recent report that you did around CISO research.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit. What sort of jumped out? What interesting things did the research tell you? I think you had over 1,000 CISOs or something like that?
Yeah, we had 1,300 CISOs from all around the world. Yeah. So pretty wide cross-section geographically across all industries. In terms of what's interesting about the report, To some extent, what's interesting about it is how it kind of validated what our customers had been telling us. So the things that our customers are telling us are not just specific to our customers, but are industry-wide problems. So things like 75% of CISOs think that too many vulnerabilities are escaping into production in their custom applications. Despite the fact that more than 70% of CISOs have a multi-layered security approach, whether it's web application firewalls or source code composition or SaaS capabilities, things like that. All of those things, even no matter how much you do, it seems like things are still escaping into production. And so I think that's really the biggest takeaway. And that we need a new approach in order to be able to to solve that problem.
It makes sense. I mean, I just got through giving a talk earlier today. Sorry, folks, I keep bringing this up on our live stream, but talking about API security, the way we construct applications is completely different with microservices, cloud native, and API first. Kind of, I mean, that alone more or less is a microservices type architecture, demanding the need for observability and tracing and the things that you kind of come from. You do have to rethink it because you can't monitor and manually manage it. A lot of it's got to be automated, but to build it into the DevOps cycle.
Exactly.
As part of that process, you're going to manually capture things earlier and get them done, because software audit creation, a lot of it is automated. So you're too late.
No, exactly. And with the software releases are happening now sometimes on more than once a day. Even if you're not doing, the crazy every 3 or 4 hour type releases, you're doing them every once a week. There's so much new code being released all the time that it's nearly impossible for developers to be able to find and fix all of the vulnerabilities in the code. Not to mention, you don't know how severe they are. I've heard literally.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on our coverage of the Linux Foundation Open Source Summit here in Austin, Texas. We're at the JW Marriott Hotel. We'll be streaming live through the day. We have a bunch of different speakers lined up to talk to us. I should mention from the outset, before we introduce our first guest, is today is what do they call it, Dave? It's not Zero Day, but it's
co-located events.
Co-located events day, so the main open source summit actually starts tomorrow. Today there are a number of co-located events though that have kicked off. The Open Source Security Foundation, I know, is one. FinOps is another one. There's 2 or 3 others that I don't recall right now. Do you?
I don't.
No. There's others as well. So a lot of people in hall. It's a little quiet where we are here, which is pretty cool. But there's a lot of people in the various rooms listening to some amazing content. With that said, though, let me introduce you to our first guest here this week. Their name is Ava Black. Hey, and we had a little conversation off camera. I should have just clue you in. Sometimes I still mess up the they pronouns, and so Ava's promised to help me. So if I mess up, she'll correct us, and hopefully they'll correct us. Excuse me. There we go, first one. Yep. And we're doing the best we can with it. Anyway, Ava, that was a lot of preamble. Tell people a little bit about yourself.
Well, today I work at Microsoft in the office of the CTO. I've been doing open source contributions and community leadership for about 23 years now. So I also sit on a couple different boards. I got elected to the board of the Open Source Initiative last year and the OpenSSF TAC, which is part of why I'm here today at the OpenSSF Day earlier this year.
For people who aren't familiar with TAC?
Technical Advisory Committee. So we're sort of, we're not the governing board,
right,
but the OpenSSF Technical Advisory Committee guides, supports the technical projects in the OpenSSF.
So it's not the board of directors governing board that are making sort of, if we want to call it, business decisions. It's really the technical advisory where what it's at a much more technical level of what they're
I'd say
doing.
the two go hand in hand. The board makes the business decisions around finance and events and marketing, and the TAC makes the technical decisions around what projects become part of the OpenSSF, how projects are governed, what the structure, sort of the templates for projects should become.
Absolutely. And I want to delve more into the OpenSSF, and especially from a technical point of view, some of the things that they're involved in, some of the other things that you're involved in around that. But before we do that, I wanted to come back to this side and talk about your keynoting tomorrow.
I am.
And not to let the cat out of the bag, but I wanted to have you talk a little bit about it. And before Ava does, though, I want to remind you all that in addition to the live in-person aspect of this event, it is virtual. So if you're watching us on TechstrongTV or Facebook or LinkedIn or DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, whatever, wherever you're watching this, there's still time for you to register and tune into Ava's keynote tomorrow, as well as the whole week, where it is a full roster of some great sessions you can check out. So check that out at Linux Foundation Open Source Summit. But Ava, go ahead.
Without giving too much away, I'm really excited to give the opening keynote tomorrow on community, codes of conduct, inclusivity, how to build sustainable, diverse communities, really. And it's a bit of a short one, so it's going to be about 5 or 6 minutes. Kick off the morning with that content. Part of the backstory is that we're in Texas, and Texas has been passing some rather, I'd say some laws or some things that are not in accordance with our values around diversity. So I'm going to talk about that and what we can all do to make our communities more inclusive. Then a longer discussion I have on Thursday on code of conduct, not as a tool of punishment, but as a tool of restoration and support for communities on Thursday afternoon.
I love it. Look, as someone who lives in Florida, who am I to say anything? I mean, quite frankly, we've got our own issues, but I don't even want to get into it. But let's talk a little bit about the code of conduct. So in my mind here, there's two aspects. Number one is, look, we struggle at TechStrong, right? We run DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, Container Journal, TechstrongTV, Digital CXO, so more than several brands. And we are challenged around diversity, right? Finding speakers. We do a lot of webinars, we do a lot of video panels. And if you couldn't tell, I'm a white male, right? So when I host something, we already got one white guy on the table here. We are constantly looking for diversity, and quite frankly, it's a challenge, right? Especially as we go deeper technically, it's like there's an inverse law there, right? Where my pool becomes smaller, and so we're always looking, right? Always trying to find, people who will represent a more diverse community when we do these kinds of video events. But I don't think we're alone, right? It's not just TechStrong. It's not just my company.
No, everyone's working on this, and everyone should be working on this. It's not a pipeline problem. There's no shortage of women and non-binary people who want to work in tech. We have to make our communities welcoming for them to stay.
Yeah. I think you hit a nail on the head there. And let me just mention, it's not just non-binary or even women. It's people of color.
Absolutely.
We do something down home in Florida. There's a school that opened near us called Boca Code, where they teach people to be full stack developers. And we sponsor a scholarship called Engineering the Change. We're actually doing a whole video series on it. But we've been doing it for 2 years. And we look for people who, underrepresented communities.
Right.
And even there, it's hard. I mean, quite frankly, getting people to apply, and it's a 12-week intense class. A lot of people don't want to put the
or don't have the privilege, right, to dedicate 12 weeks, the financial investment of that, as well as the time away from family or child care, whatever it might be.
we've
a lot
seen
of
it
folks just
firsthand.
don't have that.
No, it's a hard push. So, so that's one aspect, right? Is just finding the right people. But then there's the second piece of it, and I think you touched on it, which is how do you keep them? How do you nourish them? How do you nurture?
How do you build a community
Yeah.
of practice in open source? Because that's what we're here to talk about is open source.
Yep.
How do you build that in a way that such a diverse community feels continually welcome? And when there are crises, when there are incidents, toes get stepped on, accidents happen. My experience working in consent incident response for about 7 years now, 95% of the time it's an accident. But you still have to work at it. People still have to recognize the harm they did cause, make amends, learn, do better. And that's how we make communities safer. We also do need to identify the few percent of people that are just being malicious. And it's a real challenge. The few people that are trying to do harm. So.
I don't want to focus on them because they are a really, really small minority.
It really is, yeah.
I think the problem is when that small minority runs into public policy. Like, are all those people elected officials? Unfortunately, I don't know what it goes on.
I don't know.
But I mean, for those out there who maybe deal with this issue, without giving that minority more than they're due, do you just ignore them? Do you somehow try to cut them out like you excise a tumor?
That's an analogy. The one I like to talk about is called the analogy of a broken stair, right? We can't just ignore when there's someone in a community who's actively harming any minority in that group. What happens when we do ignore that is the folks who are in the community for a long time know, oh yeah, just don't work with that person. We know that they just, I don't know, always try and do X, or they're always kind of bad, just ignore them. But new people come in, especially from underrepresented backgrounds, and don't know that yet, and get caught. They trip on the broken stair. And so for that reason, we need groups like a Code of Conduct Committee, which I was on in Kubernetes for a while, to identify these situations, reach out to that person, offer to work with them to address this. Not just automatically excise the tumor, but offer to support them, assuming good intention from the beginning. And if they then demonstrate a lack of good intention, then and only then push them out.
Excellent. So I want to talk a little bit about open source, though, and
Yeah.
Look, I've been involved in open source software on the security side a long time, 25 years, something like that. Yeah.
Same, yeah, 99 for me is when I got in.
Yeah, with Snort and Nessus and Nmap. But anyway,
Yep.
but the nice thing about the open source community is I've always felt it was a much more welcoming,
Yeah.
big tent kind of community, as opposed to maybe some others. So, I mean, with all due respect, I think it's almost easier to do these codes of conduct kind of enforcement, or enforcement seems like you have a stick, but putting out
Stewardship.
that right stewardship, great word, in the Linux Foundation.
Yeah.
It's much harder when we go to, like, in security at the RSA show or Black Hat or DEF CON.
Well, it's not impossible in those
No,
situations.
it's not. I have a lot of friends who
And
are
we-
non-binary.
We can look at some of the InfoSec conferences that have done a really good job, and some that have tripped multiple times. There's a recent incident with one of the B-sides that's all over Twitter the past couple
I
days, and
saw it.
I'm not going to point attention to it more than that. But we can see examples of good and bad.
That is. And kind of what surprised me with the one you're talking about. Look, I was at the very first B-Sides Las Vegas long time ago.
You beat me there.
Oh, yeah, I was there the first time when they did it.
Cool.
I was at the first B-Side San Francisco.
I love that event.
I was a wrangler one year for B-Sides Vegas, too. But anyway, not to, I'd sponsor wrangler. But the whole B-Sides movement, much like Linux Foundation, was a very inclusive movement
Yes.
from the get-go. Jack Daniels and team did a great
Yeah.
job. It bummed me out a little bit to see that happen in a
Yeah.
B-Sides.
Yeah, bummed me out a lot too. I've had a lot of trust for the B-Sides community, and I know they're sort of syndicated or franchised.
And you don't want, right, and you don't
but-
want to make blanket, kinds of things.
But as a whole, I've always had good experiences in B-Sides.
Me too. Yeah.
But this sort of touches on something else, right? Inclusivity feeds into security.
Okay, talk to me.
If someone doesn't feel safe to be themselves in a community, to put on my sort of deeper InfoSec hat, right? Part of, as I understand, going for clearance is making sure there's no compromise, things like that. So if people need to feel safe emotionally to contribute, lest someone be able to push them out or apply leverage or scare them in some way. And so from that angle specifically, inclusivity is a security issue. From another
Right.
one, it's a sustainability issue. You're talking about wanting to have diverse communities, but to do that, we have to have people who contribute to open source, pick up the axe, the bucket of water, chop wood, carry water, that analogy, and then stay around for a long time, and then teach the next generation.
Yeah.
That's about sustainability, especially in our security projects in open source. We have to encourage that.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't that long ago we were reading about, harassment and so forth at worse than harassment, even, attacks at some InfoSec shows. So I don't want to give a false impression. We've made progress.
We have, but we have more to
sit
go.
here and look back.
Yeah.
It's just that, yes, there's more to be done. One other quick point on the diversity thing, and then I want to get a little technical. Look, you are who you are, and you've been doing this a long time. I am who I am. I've been doing this a long time. It's very different when you're 22 years old, coming out of school, and you're dealing with life in its entirety, and you are either non-binary or there's something else. You're a person of color, whatever. You're coming into this industry, right? And I mean, people could look at you and say, they're a role model. I did it.
I could hope.
Did that
Good job.
right.
Good job.
Yeah, thank you.
I
They're a
could-
role
I'm
model.
so honored that people
Yeah,
think
no,
that.
I mean, but that's the truth, right? But they look at you and say, well, they've been around a long time. They may not know the bumps and bruises along the way to get to where you are today, right? And they may not understand. Well, hopefully it's easier for them, right? Because there have been trailblazers who kind of did this. But talk to people coming into our communities now, whether it be InfoSec or open source or just technology in general. What advice do you give to non-binary, other underrepresented communities here? Do you just damn the torpedoes full speed ahead? Or, what's the right advice?
I don't know that there is any one right answer, or certainly not a one-size-fits-all answer. But to anyone non-binary, trans, gender non-conforming, other minorities coming into InfoSec or open source, I'd say find your people, stick together, and find supportive communities, work in them, help grow them, help pass on that knowledge and make safety for others. And communities that become more welcoming will thrive. Those that are not welcoming will not thrive, and that's part of the nature of open source.
I love it. All right. We probably took a lot of time, more than we wanted to,
great.
but we still have more time. Let's talk a bit now. So you're doing another session. I thought you said it was tomorrow afternoon?
Yes, tomorrow afternoon. I'm giving a talk on Gitbomb, which is a terrible name. People should never let me name open source projects.
You named this one?
I named this one. I'm one of the two co-founders. It is, so we've repurposed part of Git. It's a version control system, but under the hood, it's actually a blockchain, believe it or not.
Okay.
It's a Merkle tree. And so we repurposed part of that to handle software supply chain security in a particular way that others aren't doing yet. And this is complementary to SBOM, Software Bill of Materials.
Right.
It's complementary to software signing projects like SigStore.
Mm-hmm.
It's complementary to build integrity, sort of build observation like in Toto. It solves a different problem. and that is, how do I know what's in this package? What's in this tin? I like the analogy of a can of soup. And say, oh, it's Campbell's chicken noodle soup. You kind of know what it is and if you want to buy it.
Right.
If you have allergies, you can look at the back and say, well, does it contain these allergens? But that's not enough information for a recall. If you buy soup and there happens to be a recall, the store could actually call you up and say, hey, that can of soup, does it have this 10-digit
Serial
number stamped on the bottom of it? Because they know how to trace back from the factory or the farm that it came from when there's a salmonella outbreak or something, all the way through the supply chain to the store to who bought it. I want to enable that kind of artifact resolution across the supply chain in open source at zero cost to developers and projects. I want it to be automatic in our build tools for every small project out there that doesn't have a budget to buy, run big infrastructure, so that everyone who's consuming open source software has more ability to trust what's in it. This doesn't solve security problems, but it helps people discover later on, after it's been built and downloaded and being run in production, if there's a known vulnerability somewhere deep in the dependency chain, like Log4j.
Two things.
Yeah.
So first of all, I had a very interesting conversation with my friend Chen-Si Wang at RSA a couple weeks ago around S-bombs specifically, but around this whole idea now of starting to kind of really delve into the ingredients, if you will.
Yeah.
And Chen-Si's a smart woman. She brought up a interesting point, which is this isn't soup, this is software. And if I start giving you the recipe for my software, what's to stop you from spinning up your own version of it? And if it's open source, well, that's fine. You're allowed to do that. But if it's not open source, will proprietary software folks be willing to play when they realize that they're giving out their recipes?
So that's a totally great point, and one we have taken into consideration. The Git bomb project doesn't give out the recipe. It's just giving out the fingerprint, the little barcode of things, not the details of how you made it or put it together. And for commercial software, because it's a Merkle tree, there's a tree structure, a vendor who's combining open source and proprietary software can choose to selectively truncate the tree, distribute the rest of the tree with a stub there that you can then reattach under NDA if a customer asks.
Got it. I love it. Now, next question on this area that I want to explore is, is the goal here to be potentially to get, like you mentioned, artifacts, get like maybe JFrog Artifactory to include it with all of their artifacts in their repo, or maybe in the Nexus Sonatype.
Or MITRE.
Or MITRE even too, sure.
Yeah.
Is that kind of where this heads?
This is where it could go, yeah. In the Git bomb project, it's open source. I'm not focusing on any of the commercialization of this, but I can see ways where companies like those or SNCC, who just joined the project, could totally commercialize on this or build capabilities into their scanning tools. So that's possible. That it would, and I think enabling that isn't our primary goal, but it's certainly secondary, and we're taking it into account.
Okay. I also just want to be clear that Git bomb is not part of Open OSSF or Linux at this point.
Correct, at this point in time. But that's also a normal part of the process of the OpenSSF. Projects usually spin up in kind of a neutral, non-affiliated space. And then when they have a community around them, they reach a certain maturity level, then they might apply to join a foundation like the OpenSSF and go through a review process. And so if I speak from my role on the OpenSSF Technical Advisory Committee right now, I'm actually helping to define that process for project intake in a way that supports everybody.
Will there be sort of a defined thing, sort of like you have in CNCF with sandbox, incubation, all the way through to graduation?
We are working on that right now. We have a proposal getting ready to share from the TAC to the governing board pretty soon that defines all that. It's analogous to the CNCF, but not exactly the same, because we are a different foundation with different needs.
They have your own thing. All right. Last thing.
Yeah.
For people who want more information around GitBomb, where can they go?
Gitbomb.dev.
That's easy. And
Yep.
I assume it's probably on GitHub too.
It's up on GitHub. We have a GitHub org. I think it's git-bomb on GitHub, and just gitbomb, gitbom.dev, or tune into my talk Tuesday afternoon.
And you can do that even if you're not here in Austin. Again, as I said in the beginning, if you missed it, it is available as a virtual event. Well, Ava, this was probably the longest 15-minute interview you've ever done. But I want to thank you for, we had a lot to cover.
Yeah,
We had a lot to cover. I want to thank you. Thank you for all you do, not just for being on our show, but for all you're doing for communities around open source and elsewhere, as well as the security work.
Thanks so much for having me, Alan.
My pleasure. Thank you. Ava Black here on TechstrongTV. We're live in Austin. We'll be back soon with some other interesting folks to speak with.
If folks have thousands upon thousands of vulnerabilities that have been identified, and all of them have high severity scores, but that's just the highest potential severity of the vulnerability. It doesn't tell you whether that vulnerability is ever actually going to be executed in your code base or not. It doesn't tell you whether the code that's being executed is near something sensitive, like sensitive customer data, or is it even accessible from the internet, things like that. And so you have to do all that you can to keep your environment clean. But in addition to that, you also need to be monitoring what's happening in your production environment. You need security observability in order to be able to do that.
Great, very good. What other interesting things kind of popped out of the data?
Yeah, so related to that, only 25% of CISOs think that they have visibility into what's actually running in their environments.
It's not very good.
It's that. Yeah, and only 4% of CISOs think that they've got runtime vulnerability management capabilities. So not vulnerabilities that are present somewhere in your hosts or in your anywhere in your application, but actually being executed in runtime. And so that's a pretty big opportunity. I think to addressing that would be a pretty big opportunity for CISOs, I think.
Well, just on a personal note, I've been coming to RSA since 2003 or so.
Yeah.
And one of the anecdotes is if you're going to change jobs, do it right before RSAC, because it's a great place to come and catch up on what you're doing now.
Yeah.
As a newcomer to Dynatrace and coming to RSAC, getting back in person, what's your impression of the conference this year? What are some of the observations, takeaways, the vibe?
It's been a really great conference. I think to highlight specifically the area that I'm interested in, which is cloud application security. I went to the session that was run by the NSA, and they had the top 3, hacker threats. Cloud security was up there. It is one of the top 3 things, after the nation state actors, that the NSA thinks we need to be looking at as an industry. So that I think was fairly illuminating for me personally. And just the general level of interest in cloud security, I think both from attendees and attending sessions related to cloud security, the number of folks that are in them, a lot of them were completely packed, the rooms. I think that it just kind of was a great. It was great to see that that this is being recognized as an actual problem.
Behind it.
A lot of energy behind it. So
very good. Well,
yeah.
Welcome. Congrats on the new role too.
Thank you.
Where can folks download that report? I'm sure that Dynatrace has some other great resources for them.
Yeah, for sure. So if you're interested in learning more, getting more insights in the report, feel free to go to dynatrace.com and download this report. We have a lot of other great insights and pretty practical things that you can do to address your runtime vulnerabilities.
Okay, Amit, great. Wonderful talking with you.
Thank you very much.
Look forward to seeing you at next year's.
Yeah, for sure. Look forward to seeing you as well.
All right. Take care. I think we have one more interview coming up. One more, they promised me. So we're almost wrapped up here at RSAC. So we'll make sure it's a great one and get to that as soon as we can. So hang tight. Same bat station, bat channel. We'll be right back.
This is TechstrongTV.
Hey everyone, we're back here live. This is day 4, our last day of live coverage at RSA conference. It's nice and quiet. It's early in the morning here. It's only about 9 o'clock. And the crowds that came in are already in. And so here in Moscone West, it's probably one of the quietest times we've had all week.
Fantastic.
Which makes for great live broadcasting. Let me introduce you to our guest for this segment. His name is Amol Kulkarni.
That's correct.
Is that
You
correct?
got it right.
All right. Amol, first of all, welcome and thanks
Thank
for
you.
joining us. I'm going to let you kind of introduce yourself. What is your title and responsibilities? You're with, I should mention, Amol is with CrowdStrike. What do
Yeah.
you do at CrowdStrike?
Great to be here, Alan. I am the Chief Product and Engineering Officer at CrowdStrike. So I run product management, defining the vision, the roadmap for our technology, where we are going. And then, of course, I also have engineering to deliver on that. So it's define as well as
Sufficient.
deliver. It's end-to-end ownership.
Yeah. And, we were talking a little off camera. I'm Digital CXO, our newest community and brand that we've been developing, is really a testament to this kind of new way of thinking
That's true.
at the upper echelons, this C-level.
That's right.
And so the idea of having a C-level person who not only defines the product, but then actually leads the team building the product.
That's right.
You know what? 5-10 years ago, that was unheard of.
That was not common. Yeah.
Very not common.
Yeah.
But today we're seeing this more and more.
Yeah.
The chief product officer is also the chief technology officer,
Mm-hmm.
or the chief engineering guy is also the CTO.
Right.
The CIO sometimes is also the chief information security officer.
Absolutely.
It is it's a very different. Digital transformation, I think, is
Pushing that out. I mean, I think the way to think about it is we work with a full DevOps mindset, and to me, DevOps is a culture,
right.
where it's all about that end-to-end ownership. So
Yes.
even within engineering, we say the engineers have to own it from defining the how, the design, all the way to implementation and also supporting it in production. Right?
Yeah.
So we don't have a separate operations team, for example. That's by design because we embrace DevOps as a culture. And I think this merging of roles is in a similar vein, right? So someone who is defining the product should also be do it in a grounded way to say, okay, what is possible.
Right.
A lot of those like the tussles, the conflicts that used to be there go away because of that. Because
Absolutely.
and you have to be balanced on both sides.
I mean, I'm thinking back to my own experience before TechStrong. I was involved in several venture-backed startups,
Right.
and now that you say you're doing it, it just like a light bulb. It makes perfect sense
Right.
because we would have a product team, and I was involved, in product,
Right.
and we had a vision for what the feature looked like. This is
Right.
before DevOps. We're doing
That's
a
right.
release
That's
twice a
right.
year.
Yeah.
So we had a vision of what this feature would be and what that feature would be. And then we give that to the engineering team. And, they'd come back to us with some prototypes or MVP or whatever you want to call them back then.
Right.
And that's not what we were thinking.
No, right, exactly.
That's
exactly.
not what
So
we
you have
meant.
to iterate and
Yeah.
Exactly. So
And so doing it, having, one person own both of that, it's now that I think about it, it's a no-brainer.
yeah.
Anyway,
It works for some organizations. I mean,
Yeah,
I wouldn't say like it's
you're right. It
like it's
depends
not a
on the
solution for everyone.
organization.
That's right.
but I think it's a forward way of looking at it.
Right.
Let's talk about CrowdStrike, though. You guys have had several product announcements during
That's right.
the week here at RSA.
Yep.
Why don't, if you don't mind, share with our audience?
Absolutely. So super excited to talk about all of the announcements we made at RSA this week. The biggest one, I'll start with that, which to me is very exciting because it's a fundamental piece of technology that we're building. It's called CrowdStrike Asset Graph. What Asset Graph does is gives organizations a 360-degree view into all of their IT assets, their cloud assets, their mobile assets, their IoT assets, so all assets, but not just assets, also the configurations on those assets, the users and identities in their organizations,
Really? Okay.
and applications that are running
on
deployed on those. But going even beyond that, it's also looking at relationships between all of those entities. So which users are logging on to which hosts, which applications are deployed on which hosts, are being used by which users. All of that as a holistic graph database. It is the first time that this is being done as a large-scale graph database, with all of the relationships being incorporated in a truly schematized manner.
Absolutely.
So that's super exciting, because I think it enables a lot of different scenarios. And the first one we are starting off with is our product Falcon Discover, which gives users the understanding of which hosts are managed meaning they have CrowdStrike Falcon sensor on them, which hosts are unmanaged, what applications are deployed, which versions do they have, which users have what kind of privileges, sort of giving you just a understanding, a visibility into your landscape. Is that to me is the biggest problem we have today, right?
Well, yeah. You're talking about fundamental security issues.
That's right.
Here, right?
That's right.
So number one is you can't defend what you don't know you have.
Absolutely.
Number two, look, I've been in this business for 25 years, right? You remember Big Fix?
Right.
IBM bought them
That's right.
10, 12 years ago.
Yeah.
That was the whole Big Fix model, right? Is we can't fix, you got to know what you have.
You have to know
we
what you
can-
have.
We can
Absolutely.
fix it.
Absolutely.
They didn't, and maybe I'm not blaming them, don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but we didn't have the technology then to go to the depth
That's right.
that you're going.
I mean,
to
graph
now.
databases didn't exist. Like that's new, right?
I mean, we could tell what IP address and what that device said it was from
Right.
that IP address.
That's right.
Applications, users, these kinds. We just didn't have.
That's
we
right.
didn't have that kind of information.
Yeah.
Number two, though, is the ability, like you said, manage devices, meaning there's some sort of agent, whether
Right.
you want to call it an agentless agent or an agent.
That's right.
There's something on there.
Yeah.
But what we've seen is now the ability to do it on unmanaged devices.
Exactly.
Because again, it's easy to know what you have when you already have an agent on them.
That's right.
Chances are the ones we don't know are the ones that don't have that agent.
And that's a major problem for
Sure
just
is.
even for compliance. Like,
Yeah.
what coverage do I have? Do I have 100% coverage with the security tools that I'm supposed to be deploying?
Absolutely.
And in this remote first world, there are resources all over the place, right? That are popping up.
Yeah.
That are part of the enterprise, but they are invisible to a large extent. Plus, shadow IT is a big thing. So all of those, like doing that sort of real-time updated 360-degree view into your assets and into your enterprise was a big hard problem. And one of the key things we solved within that is a problem of entity resolution, which is multiple data sources tell you about something, right? They may be telling you about, let's say, this computer, or another data source may be telling you some bits about the same computer, or could be about a different one. And how do you know if they're talking about two different things or two same things? Like one of the customers we were talking to was saying, hey, I have the same host name, the same IP address for two different computers on two different subnets, right? And we have to disambiguate that. So that's a hard problem of entity resolution that we've solved with this.
Absolutely. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. We've got two more.
Yeah, two more. So the other one is we CrowdStrike recently acquired a company called Humio.
Yes.
Which is an index-free, schema-aware but schema-free data store, infinitely scalable, live search. And what we're doing as part of this announcement is to connect CrowdStrike Falcon with Humio through Humio for Falcon. So that enables Falcon data to be seamlessly moved over into Humio, enables long-term retention in Humio for users to do their compliance requirements, their auditing requirements.
Love it.
As well as retrospective hunting and forensics, right?
Yep.
So something happened, Falcon detected it, prevented it, mitigated it, but now 6 months later, you want to say, hey, what exactly happened? When did they come in? All of that you can do with Humio, with that infinite fast search that we are making available. So that's the second announcement.
Excellent.
Right.
Actually, I think I'd done an interview with someone from CrowdStrike
From-
and Humio,
on Humio.
Humio/CrowdStrike on
Right.
that.
That's right.
But that again, we didn't have that capability,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
And now we do.
Yeah.
Last one.
Yeah. So the last one is around Falcon XDR. So XDR, as you obviously know, there's a lot of buzz around it, and lot of
Almost as much as Zero Trust.
as
but
much as
go
zero
ahead.
trust. That's right. But we've been focused on making sure that XDR adds true value to customers, and as part of that, what we've done is integrated XDR, implemented the response part of XDR using Falcon Fusion, our SOAR framework that's built into the Falcon platform. So we've given it part of platform, not as a separate SKU. No one has to purchase it. You have it available as soon as you are a Falcon customer. And XDR is deeply integrating with that, leveraging it for all the response capabilities. And the second part is the XDR value is in the ecosystem. Which partners are part of it? How are you doing detections across multiple domains, multiple technologies, starting from EDR, but extending it out to all of the other domains. And as part of that, this week we announced addition of 3 additional partners: Mendo Security,
Oh, sure.
for web and browsing,
Yep.
Vectra AI for NDR,
Well, yep.
and Ping Identity for
Identity and access.
So
Beautiful.
all of these areas already have existing partners, and we continue to add new partners to deepen it, and more importantly, cover the technologies that our customers have deployed.
Those are also in each of their areas. These are leading companies.
That's
so,
right.
real quality stuff there.
Yeah.
So this is. I sit here, I observe. I
Right.
don't have to sell product,
That's
build
right.
product.
That's right.
I look at all the XDR buzz here.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if a lot of people have really got their XDR story right. Right.
I think there's I mean, if you ask multiple people, you'll get multiple answers on what XDR even is. Right?
Well, this always happens at RSA, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because you get a buzz and everyone's running with it.
That's right.
And it becomes extended. Remember, Microsoft used to use that term. We're going to extend it. Right?
Yes.
And
That's right.
extension means a lot of different things.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, we've been trying to be very, very crisp and clear on our XDR definition.
Yeah.
And really the key focus is to find detections, find alerts that one single domain would not have found.
Right.
So take weak signals from multiple different areas, from email security, from web security, from endpoint, from CASB. But because those weak signals are happening within a short window and they are correlated, you can say, oh, there is something really malicious going on here, even though each of those individually would not alert you.
Right.
So that's kind of the idea.
So it's a little more mature than some of the stuff I've seen running around here.
I hope so. Yes.
Yeah. So that's good. So it sounds like you guys haven't been too busy then.
We are not too busy. Yes.
What about impressions of RSA this week?
RSA has been fantastic. I mean, I think biggest thing I would say is people have been super excited about meeting everyone in person. I mean, this is 2 years, 2+ years. We were here in March 2020, and towards the end of it, like people were not shaking hands; they were fist bumping, right? As the pandemic was starting, and now it's fantastic to see everyone here. So I was honestly pleasantly surprised with the traffic and the buzz, and yeah, I mean that energy is fantastic.
Keep in mind, it's still half of what it was.
It is still
in
half of
2019.
That's right.
But even half of RSA is a lot
huge.
more than any place. Exactly. So good stuff.
So I think that's great. And then, yeah, I mean, like, obviously we've had a lot of announcements. Other companies continue to do that. So there is a lot of momentum.
Well, look, there's always stuff going on.
That's right.
In the cyber world. And traditionally RSA and then maybe Black Hat this summer is the place where it all kind of comes together and we see it in mass.
That's
but anyway, Amal, thank you
very
so
much, Alan.
for being
Great.
on our show.
I appreciate it.
Hey, we're live here at RSA. It's still quiet, but there's people on the escalators we see. We're going to be live here all day wrapping up our coverage. We hope to see you back on. We'll be on in just a few moments.
is TechstrongTV.
And we are back at TechstrongTV live at RSAC. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon. Thank you very much for being a part of my day today. We're having so many great conversations here, and I'm about to have another great one with Asaf Kohan, who is the co-founder at a company called Centra. Asaf, thank you so much for stopping by and saying hello and having the conversation with me. Do appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here, Charlene. Thank you.
Excellent. So you are a brand new company. Centra is a brand new company. You guys are based in Tel Aviv, correct?
That's correct.
Excellent. So tell me a little bit about Centra, what it does, how you founded the company, and just any background you want to share.
Super. Thanks, Charlene. So Centra is a relatively young company. We're just under a year on the road.
Very young.
Based upon my previous experience, I was head of Unit 8200 in the Israeli Defense Forces. I came to a few fundamental kind of understandings about what's beneath the surface of the world, how messy it is. And Centra's main mission is to deal with data. We have an extremely data-centric approach. And we really believe that after we studied it, most organizations don't really understand where the data is. Mm-hmm. They don't understand where their valuable and sensitive data is. And another premise that Centra was founded upon is that every organization will be breached and penetrated. So it's not a matter of if you're going to be breached, you have to pre-position yourself and assume that you're going to be breached. So the combination of 100% being breached and knowing where your data and pre-positioning yourself, this is kind of the key foundational layer to Centra.
Right. So is it safe to say you are bringing a level of visibility to the data, or is it more about understanding where the gaps are in your security posture?
So the first is correct.
Okay.
Centra is basically and fundamentally about discovering and understanding data, classifying data, and being able to put light on data that organizations don't know they have.
Oh.
We call it shadow data. Again, this is something I'm deeply and profoundly, I believe in, that most organizations have data that they don't even have a clue that they have. And this part of Centra of understanding and revealing the data would be the first layer of Centra's promise and offering.
Okay. So it's, the idea of data security, or just the topic of data security, it's such a vast topic. We've been talking about data security for a very, very long time, but obviously, especially over the last couple of years, it has become much more important, and companies are paying a lot more attention to the security, not only of their networks, but also of the data and the way that it travels. Have you seen a shift in kind of maybe the messaging around data security as we've kind of lived through the last couple of years and moving forward?
Yeah. I think the major paradigm shift is to do with the movement to the cloud environment.
Sure.
And the collision between cloud technology, cybersecurity, and data is a new space. With a new paradigm. So if it would be the on-prem era, it was relatively, I would say, simple to understand where your data is. It was physically locked in a data center with a key. There was a door to the data center. Right. In the cloud, there's no a perimeter. There's actually no perimeter. And you really don't understand where your data is. And the amount of data which you produce, the amount of data which you consume in the cloud, the amount of data which moves in the cloud, makes it incredibly hard to track and to control data. And Centra's mission is to basically enable organizations to regain control over this part.
It seems like such a fundamental thing for organizations to do, but obviously, because of all of the issues that we have seen in the cybersecurity and the data security space, it doesn't seem to be an easy task. So what do you think, this seems like a problem that we should have solved by now, especially with so many organizations moving to the cloud. So why do you think it has taken so long?
Fundamentally, I believe that most of the security establishment focused on what I would call defending the network, putting barracks and layers and trying to pull the perimeter paradigm from the on-prem era to the cloud. Dealing with data wasn't perceived as their job. It was perceived as people jobs.
Other person's
data
problems,
engineers,
right?
yeah, data engineers and so forth. It wasn't perceived as the key part of the security stack. I think it starts from that part of feeling responsibility for data and understanding that the main mission of security teams is at the end of the day to understand and protect the data. It's all about, when there's a breach, it's not the network which is flowing out. It's
Right.
data which is flowing
Exactly.
out. So I think this is a fundamental problem. It wasn't perceived as a key responsibility of security teams, and there was someone else who could be kind of responsible for that.
Yeah.
And that's changing.
Yeah, and that's actually a very, very good point, because I think when we get kind of an understanding, if you will, within the entire security community of what they're really supposed to be protecting, I think we will see a lot more movement in the data security space and a much more embracing of these different technologies to secure data security. But I still feel like we might be early days as far
Very
as
much so. Very much so. I again, profoundly believe that there's a convergence between three different parts of which were siloed in enterprises. The traditional security, which was basically meant to prevent from others getting in and from information leaking out or from stuff going out. The compliance part, taking care of customers' data, which every organization is interested in it, and some are fined if they don't do it.
Right.
And the other part is the ability to do digital transformation, so consume data and create revenue from data. And these three parts are aligning and kind of getting much more interacted together. And it's creating an environment whereby security teams are not longer just responsible for risk reduction. They have a responsibility to enable organizations who are data-driven to move much faster in order to create more revenue. And they will be accountable for that, and they will be judged on that. And part of it, you can't do it without understanding anything about your data.
That's true. And for so many years, the security of a company was relegated to one department. Now it seems like, well, not seems like it is. It's everybody's responsibility. So, we talk about the shared responsibility model with cloud services providers, but I really think that mindset should also be within an organization. The fact that everybody has a role to play in securing the data, in ensuring that, they alert the right people if they notice something is off, and so much more. So do you think that we're kind of maybe approaching security I don't want to say incorrectly, but maybe we need to rethink the way that we do approach security in organizations to create a much more security-minded organization as a whole?
Yeah, at the end of the day, because it's all about the data, and the data will be the major source of revenue for organizations. Mark Andreessen a decade ago spoke about the fact that software is eating the world.
Right.
Today it's data and cloud which are eating the world. And in this sense, you have to have a very broad sense of accountability to having a data hygienic environment, responsibility for protecting data. So it's DevOps, it's the business side, it's the compliance side, it's the security. In this sense, it's, again, at the end of the day, you have to have people who are accountable and responsible. These will be the security compliance teams, but it has to be shared responsibility, and they can't do it by themselves. And what Centra basically does, it creates a platform which spills light.
Hey everyone, we're back here live at the Linux Foundation Open Source Summit here in Austin, Texas. And as we mentioned earlier, today is a day of, I don't know if you want to call it daughter, sister foundations or satellite conferences. The main event really starts tomorrow, but there's several important foundations who are holding conferences today. One of which, and kind of the one probably nearest to me, is the Open Source Security Foundation, OSSF. And we are really happy to be joined by Janie Thomas, who is the governing chair or the chair of the governing
Yes.
board of
Yes.
OSSF.
Exactly.
Got it. Janie, welcome to our show. Thanks for joining us. So, look, when you're not busy running or being chair of the board for OSSF, you have a day job as well. If you want to share with our audience, feel free.
Well, first of all, Alan, thanks for having me.
Oh,
I'm
my
really
pleasure.
pleased to be here to talk about OpenSSF. But I am a general manager at IBM responsible for systems development and delivery, as well as IBM's enterprise security program.
Right.
And enterprise security, of course, is how I got involved in this particular topic.
Absolutely. And that, look, that is a world and job unto itself, and we could probably do a few hours on that, but we're going to focus on OSSF today. So, you know, for most of our audience is familiar, we've had the pleasure of speaking with Brian from OSSF a few times. It was a nice idea, I think, when it was first conceived about, yes, we need to do something about security, about the security of open source tools specifically. And then kind of all hell broke loose. You know, sometimes things just work like that, right? History runs in currents. So we started the the OSSF, and then we had this spate of supply chain
Yes.
security issues and the whole S-bomb thing with the White House. And then like kind of the cherry on top was Log4j. I guess that was around when, January or
December of last year.
And that's really, I guess, has it accelerated? Maybe you had big plans to begin with. Talk to us a little bit about kind of the whole OSSF, how it all came together and what's happened.
Well, I think it was very fortuitous that the industry did come together last year with the Linux Foundation to create a new governing body around open source security called the OpenSSF. Because as you say, not long after that, we had this industry compelling event, Log4j. And realized the industry we'd already had SolarWinds the year before, which also ruined our holiday in December.
Yes, it did.
We had Kaseya, we had a number of these big supply chain attacks. But the difference, I would say, in Log4j is just the predominance of the asset in code. It had been out there for over 20 years. It was a very utilized, a very popular piece of code, and so it affected a lot of software. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that you realize when this kind of thing happens, it's not just about your fidelity of being able to identify it and get it patched, but for all those downstream consuming organizations, how fast do they roll out these patches? Because we're talking about a huge amount of affected software. So I think that there's nothing like a true test of your governing body, and this was
Test by
actually a
fire.
real test run of what we needed to do in OpenSSF, and of course it garnered a lot of attention from the U.S. government and other entities that we can talk more about.
Sure can. So let's talk a little bit about the charter or the mission of the OpenSSF, and it's something I brought up to you off camera, which is, okay, Log4j, let's make that the poster child for a second. So Log4j is basically this open source component, if you will, right, that many applications have incorporated into their package, if you will, into their source code. And it's not, look, I'm not blaming the Log4j developers or anything. There was a defect. I don't even want to, it became a vulnerability, but there's a defect. A lot of software has defects that we haven't even found yet. But nevertheless, this one kind of went public, and then we saw exploits with it and in the wild, and such is the world of security we both live in. What is the chart? Is that what OSSF is about, to prevent, or not prevent, but deal with future Log4j kind of events?
Well, I think first and foremost, OpenSSF is focused on a proactive posture, right? So how do we prevent these kinds of events? And so to do that, we think there's a number of things we have to do. First and foremost is education, of course, in terms of basic security education for developers. Another key tenet is, how do you put automation on steroids? So the automation and best practices that are reflected in that automation that open source projects can consume. How do you get that out to the most critical projects and then provide some support for the long tail projects, if you will?
Sure.
It's also about working, frankly, with other industry consortia as well as the government. Particularly, we've been working with the U.S. government in the OpenSSF to define what are some actions that are really going to make a difference. And I think critical to all of this is getting collaboration across the different insights from the governing body, which includes a lot of technology firms as well as commercial firms. Like there's a lot of financial firms actually involved in the governing body. What are the key elements that we really need to address first? So getting those priorities set and then having an execution agenda and really getting something done in the short term, I think is really going to be important for this group.
Well, look, a lot of people look out at what you guys have done, and you've gotten stuff done, right? There's been a tremendous groundswell of support. And granted, Log4j didn't hurt you in that regard as much as it hurt others. But there's been a tremendous groundswell, right? There's been I think about $30 million raised, right, between some of the biggest names in tech kicking in here. There's been the White House and CISA involvement. So it's certainly, for a relatively new foundation, it has really garnered a lot of, I don't want to say market share, but a lot of publicity, a lot of attention.
Yeah.
Now, of course, the question is, okay, how does this translate to rubber meets the road? How do we prevent the next Log4j? I don't know if we can prevent the next Log4j, but how do we minimize the next Log4j?
How do you minimize the impact? Exactly. Because I would say, if you look at what happened with Log4j, the level of preparedness was not there. So, how do you get it remediated fast enough? How do you identify it? How do you help the open source projects be more effective? In this case, it was, of course, tied to the Apache Foundation. But not only that, how do the commercial entities then take advantage of that patch and act expeditiously to benefit the clients? So I think there's a real opportunity here. In the world of cybersecurity, you often learn that no one pays attention to a lot of things unless there's a huge compelling event, and that's what this was. So while it was not desired, it was helpful in that vein. So coming out of all of the meetings that we've had, the collaboration that we've had across the industry, it's going to be imperative that we execute, and that the things that we have identified as top priorities, that we make measurable progress on those projects this year.
Sure.
And I think that's the importance of this Open SSF Day here today in Austin, which is allowing us with a key set of stakeholders to start to share perspectives of the projects that are underway and how others can engage in those projects, and how, once again, working together, we can actually make a difference. I think this ongoing level of engagement, making sure that we have the right stakeholders engaged, is going to be important to make progress.
Absolutely.
And as you know, in the world of open source, the nice thing about OpenSSF is we do have the ability to hire critical roles that can focus on this full time, because the nature of open source typically is that it's a volunteer army, right? And there's thousands and thousands of volunteers out there, but then how do we help with these resources enable those volunteers to be more effective?
And frankly, that's been one of, I think, the key ingredients to the Linux Foundation's formula for success is, herding. It's a bit like herding cats, herding the open source community. It's vast. So, cats to thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions. But you need a few full-timers who are, this is their day job, right? This is what they do. Jenny, I want to talk a little bit, the people who are watching this now at home, or maybe, recorded later on, they weren't here. They didn't get what was happening, especially today, which is kind of, the OSSF's day. Give them, if you don't mind, a little bit of maybe a synopsis of what they're missing.
Well, we just got started, of course, so we have a little bit more to go today, of course, in terms of the actual kickoff of OpenSSF Day. But I think what I see is real commitment, particularly from the presenters I've seen so far, a commitment that they've all personally made, and outside of their day jobs, frankly, to make a difference in security for open source software. And that's really the key here. Are we turning the corner on a new level of commitment around security?
Right.
There's always been a commitment in open source around innovation, around feature function. I mean, that's what's that's what's driven open source and allowed it to be so successful, and for others other corporations like IBM, we've taken enormous advantage out of that, right? We've all gotten a huge advantage in productivity out of that. But now it's really about turning the focus a little bit more, getting that focus on security so that we can use open source and continue to have that productivity, but with confidence as we go forward. And I really have been impressed with all the speakers today and their personal commitment to this topic. And that's really impressive, and I think we'll see that for the rest of the day as well.
I'm going to come back to you in 1 second. I want to touch on something else, though, and that is this. Look, I've been in security for 25, going on 30 years. Well, security 25, IT 30 plus years. And if I had a nickel for every survey I read that said security is one of the top 3 priorities of IT or the CIO or an organization, I'd be a rich person right now. But like I always said, their arms were too short to reach their pockets oftentimes.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until something bad happened, like a Log4j or some incident, code red, and I could go through a whole history of these things, that people kind of get religion, right? Excuse me. Sometimes it takes that for them to get religion. I don't know why. I always hope that it changes, that people finally do start taking it seriously. I think for the OSSF, though, the important thing to remember, especially in our audience, this is a fact we give them all the time. Today's applications, there's 75%, 80% open source components that are kind of stitched together with maybe 20, 25% of, sort of original code, if you will. And so if someone's not watching the store on those open source components, whether they're artifacts or scripts or whatever, it's only a matter of time. It's not if, it's when, right? And so that's why I think this is such a vital function, this foundation. It's something needed to happen here.
Yeah.
And this is the perfect, I think, place for it. Anyway, I'll step off the soapbox. You mentioned a couple of the speakers. Anything stand out to you or that you can kind of clue our audience into?
Well, I think other than the commitment, there's a keen focus on making it easy for the developers, right? How do we make it easy for the maintainers of these open source projects? How do we make it easy for the contributors? Because without doing that, it will not have the consumption by developers at large, right? And I know this even inside a corporation, we have the same challenge. Really, it's all about codifying the best practices in an automation framework. And whatever that is for your organization, that's going to be critical. And that's why it's so critical for these open source projects. I think that with the right approach, we will make a difference. But it also, as you said, requires stakeholders involved to continue to educate their organizations about why is it important. Because all of us actually have the ability to increase the number of contributors we have on these projects, to contribute our expertise. And that's going to be very important, I think, that we as the governing body and other organizations really create a sustaining promise around open source. So it's not just what the OpenSSF is doing itself, but how we enable that to be successful in the long run. Because we're all getting the advantage from open source. And like IBM, we, of course, it's IBM plus our company Red Hat. It has a little bit to do with open source. But those kinds of efforts and keeping that keen focus are going to be very, very important as we go forward.
No, there's no doubt about it. It also goes back to what we said before is, look, there's a new Log4j kind of event horizon out there every day.
Yeah, there is.
So you're not going to prevent them. You've got to put in your response. You've got to have your protocols in place. And this is the kind of stuff where
absolutely. I will tell you that, I have a window into cyber operations, which is my job every day at IBM. And we're getting over 100 billion events a day. So that gives you kind of the context for what you got to deal with in the landscape. And product security, of course, is one of those triggers. If you've got malware, if you've got issues, they're going to be one of your events, right?
Yep.
So it's a little bit of a reflection on our responsibility to enable effective cyber operations for organizations. I mean, we have a huge responsibility, but we have a huge opportunity here.
Absolutely.
And I think I want to make heroes out of developers for really worrying about security. That's kind of one of the goals.
You know what? Look, you're preaching to the choir here because, I started DevOps.com in 2013, 2014. And I did it because as a security person, I thought it was the best thing to happen to security. If we could get developers security aware, security conscious, half the battle. And, for a long time, it was an uphill battle, let me say this. But this whole notion of what we call DevSecOps and making security for developers, it's really gone mainstream, right? And I think part of that is realizing is developers, security is everyone's responsibility. It's a very overused thing. Developers are not security people, but I've never met a developer in my life who says, yeah, I'd like to develop insecure software, right? I want to use an old version of an open source component that has some known vulnerabilities. None of them want to. We all have pride in our work. It's just we need to make it easier for them to do. And I think that's something OSSF can really help with. Anyway, I know you're busy as heck today. I want to thank you for coming down and hanging out with us a little bit. To you, Brian, the whole OSSF team, keep up the great work. Well, we're expecting big things. No pressure, but we're expecting big things from you guys to really make the difference.
Well, thank you, Alan. I'm really pleased to be here today and immerse myself in this topic and get to know many of the players that are here today. And thanks for the opportunity to chat.
No problem. Just before we leave, real quickly, the OSSF website, I think it's ossf.org. OpenSSF.org. I got a little help from my off-camera team over there. So go check it out. If if you're not here in person, I believe it is virtual as well. We'd love to see you as part of it and support the Open SSF. We're going to take a break here in Austin. We'll be back in a bit.
On the data assets of every organization that everyone can see. And once you see it, you can build a model of shared responsibility.
Yep. If you don't know it's there, how can you protect it, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct,
So-
Charlene. That's correct.
So Centra is part of our DevSecOps days at RSA.
So we're currently, as I said, relatively young. We came to see RSA, so we don't have a booth yet. Next year, we're going to conquer RSA.
Excellent.
But we came to see, we came to network, we came to meet potential customers. We're doing really good here. And for me, it's also on a personal kind of level, it's liberating after two and a half years of COVID to kind of engage in such a vibrant, energetic environment. I think you feel the same. No?
I do. I feel just there's an energy here that we've all been waiting for this for a very long time. And it's nice to see people, from the neck down, because we've been living in a Zoom world for the last 2.5 years. So it's very, it's just a lot to fun to actually get.
So I have to remind myself I have to dress properly.
I know. Put
beneath
on a pair
my
of pants.
shirt. So but it's great. And again, I'm enjoying myself. I'm thoroughly enjoying myself here.
Excellent. Is this your first RSA?
Yeah, it's my first RSA. As I said, I was head of Unit 8200. I was sending people to RSA, but I can participate, and I'm sure it's going to be first of many more RSAs. So
I certainly hope so. Asaf, thank you so much for having the conversation with me about your company. I wish you guys the best of luck, and we'll see you back here next year.
Thank you, Charlene. It's been a pleasure to be here, and all the best.
Excellent.
Great.
All right. So guys, stick around because we've got lots more interviews happening today throughout the day. But for now, we're just going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
This is TechstrongTV.
Hey, welcome back to RSAC 2022. Mitch Ashley, we're just rotating all of our of our hosts. Alan is offsite doing some fun stuff. So I have the great pleasure of being joined by Alon Nahwani. Thank you very much. I appreciate the help. And you are field CISO with AppViewX. There we
Correct?
go. I'm stumbling. It's been a long week, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's well, I think we're all pretty much exhausted at this point.
Yeah, we're kind of reaching that giddy stage. I think I am. Well, tell us about yourself. Tell us about the company.
So I'm the field CISO for AppViewX. I've been here for about 2.5 years. AppViewX does certificate lifecycle management. We kind of take your PKI, your infrastructure, and automate it, both from a DevOps kind of reduce the outages, and then also from a security perspective, we protect your private keys and just kind of protect your crown jewels. You know, the keys to the castle, to make sure that only those who need access to them when they need the access have access. And we can, through automation, we can integrate with like an ITSM. So if there's a developer that's spinning up a new web application, we can actually, go and install the certificate all, directly without them even interacting with any PKI infrastructure. We'll issue the certificate, install it, and then as needed, we can revoke the certificate, we can renew it, reduce outages, no more spreadsheets to manage everything, nothing kind of getting forgotten.
What folder is that in?
Yep, exactly. No shared calendar that I forgot to subscribe to. I didn't get the alert. Oh my God.
Expired? Oh, wow.
Yep, exactly.
So is this cloud-based, or are you doing like a HSM for the vaulting and all the managing on-prem?
We integrate with, we're CA agnostic. We'll integrate with all the CAs. We'll integrate with an HSM if you're using one. And then we'll go and install it. We even have part of our platform around application delivery. We'll even manage your application delivery controller from firmware or any changes that if you want to change the ciphers. If you're managing multiple application delivery controllers, getting that uniformity, that kind of golden image on all of them. It's a pain for a lot of people. So that's also something that we kind of bring to the table.
Excuse me. So I just finished a talk on API security, and the message was, manual nothing, because it's all happening too fast. You'll never keep up.
It's not even that. You also
PKI
have
is kind of the same challenge, right?
Yeah. So it's not even just too fast. So there's two parts to why you would want to automate it. The first one is, you want to make sure that you have the consistency and that you don't have somebody fat fingering, forgetting a step. If you've sat there and you've done the same mundane task over and over again, at some point you're like, I know the steps. I don't need the checklist. Yeah. I'll sit there.
Shortcut.
Oh, wait, on that one, I forgot this step. And on that one, I forgot this step. And all of a sudden, that consistency is no longer there. But then on the flip side, and it's kind of my personal soapbox, but, do you really want your employees sitting there and doing a mundane task? You didn't hire smart individuals to sit there and just click on the same button in the Ford plant over and over again, screwing the wrench. You tap into their knowledge, tap into their brain. Let's free our people from the mundane, use automation where we can, and tap into people's potential.
I'm curious, are you primarily working with CAs, external CAs, or do you also have people who have, God forbid, they've gone off and created their own CA hierarchy and trying to manage it themselves? Bigger organizations can do that, but most people can't afford or find the people to do that.
So, all of the above. We're finding that people not only have one external CA and often, like you said, a private CA internally. We're also finding through whether it be like a merger and acquisition situation or they migrated from one onto another. A lot of organizations have more than one public CA that they're working with. And
I would think most do. Yeah.
It's crazy because, it's so easy for things to just fall between the cracks and for people to miss things. And again, back to those spreadsheets of like that one system that's a middleware somewhere that integrates with everything all together. Nobody remembers. And by the way, that's using a cert, and whoever created it way back when isn't here anymore. And that shared calendar was their calendar. And, now we have an outage. And it's funny. I mean, being here at RSA, we've had several people come by our booth of, we just had a certificate outage. We need a solution for this. So many people are having outages because of it. I'm a huge believer in the security side of things of, hey, let's make sure our private keys, and we don't want, the exposure there. I mean, look at SolarWinds. Their private keys, that were used for signing software were exposed, and that's really kind of what happened.
Not recommended.
Right, exactly. But even before that perspective, you have the perspective of an outage, and people don't even think that it could be something as simple as a certificate.
It's amazing because, well, software is happening all over the organization too. So it's the IT and the network organization security, but it's happening in the business unit. Somebody goes and fires up credit card with some hosting service or cloud service, and gets a Google certificate or whatever from wherever, and
nobody knows about it.
Nobody knows about it. It's not managed and it expires someday, or it wasn't set up with the proper security standards. So it's a proliferation problem too.
For sure, and it's something that we're seeing over and over and over again. I mean, I can't tell you how many organizations, being a former CISO, I hate the idea of running a scan in a network that in an environment, but through doing something like that, you'd be surprised how many of those, hey, that one guy bought I saw a company with a GoDaddy certificate that had never been a GoDaddy customer, that some guy bought just
some
like you
contractor,
said, with their own,
right, whatever,
with their own credit card, because they just wanted to finish the project and get it done so they could go on vacation, and that was sitting there, and when that certificate expired, it was an outage.
Yep, that's the world we live in today. So tell me a little bit about, there's so much around zero trust, there's so much around XDR. Security world is buzzword bingo, right? and no thanks to the analyst, and I'm an analyst, we create that problem for ourselves. Zero trust has been a conversation for a long time, mostly about what it is. I think people are getting more, okay, how do I start? Where do I start? What do I do? What's your take on zero trust, and how do we need to think about it?
It's really interesting because we're seeing that. You walk down on the floor, you'll see zero trust on every single booth. I heard somebody say yesterday, it's zero trust 30. It's just crazy to me. Which
it's going to be a car brand, pretty soon,
basically at this point. Which, truth be told, it sucks because it's a really important concept, and it's something that's very critical as a mindset for security, that's being turned into a buzzword that just everybody seems to be throwing out there. But within zero trust, everybody's talking about kind of the human identity, and again, back to the concept of, you don't let something onto your network without knowing who they are, and making sure that you authenticate it and all that. What I'm missing, and it's something that we happen to be talking about, is what about the machines? What about the devices we're allowing on our networks? Why are you allowing somebody to authenticate? For them to authenticate, that machine already needs an IP address, needs to be able to communicate, needs to be on the network. Why are you letting it on the network? Why aren't you authenticating, making sure that device, is authenticated, is part of your network, and that zero trust model is even a step before authenticating the human behind the device, you're authenticating the actual device. And that's, machine identity management, which is one of the things that we do and we assist with. We do that through certificates and pushing certificates to devices for authentication on your environment before you let it in. Real quick on that, I can tell you that, I did a lot of OT security with, gas and oil and water and power in airports. And I walked the terminal with the CIO and a CISO from an airport. The three of us walked together, and they just looked at me and they said, "Look around. What do you see?" I said, "I don't know. I see people. What do I see?" He's like, "Well, they all have devices." I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "All those devices have white cables." And it's true. Everybody has a white charging cable. And he said to me, they'll plug that USB into anything. And even if it's a network cable that's white, security in the airport isn't going to notice a white cable. They're going to think that somebody's charging. So how do you make sure that only the devices